Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited to have Amy Malick on. She's the Deputy Commissioner of Sustainability in Chicago, the great city of Chicago. Welcome to Green is Good, Amy.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, Amy, before we get into talking about all the great work you're doing in Chicago, and especially with regards to sustainability and aviation, can you first share the Amy Malick story and how you even got here?
Sure, I'll try to keep it brief. But
Okay.
In any case, my interest has actually always been in sustainability. I studied urban planning at the University of Washington in Seattle, which, as you can imagine, is kind of a hotbed for sustainability. And it's always been something I'm very interested in. Most of my history was actually in more of the urban transit and urban sustainability realm. I don't actually have too much of an aviation background before joining the department about 3 years ago. And I have to say I was a little bit nervous when I joined the airport because it's just not a background that I had held. And I figured there must be some secret language to aviation that I certainly wasn't cued into. But in any case, as I learned when I joined in this role, I learned that airports are very much like cities. And certainly, there's all kinds of different lessons that we can learn from airports to help manage resources. We certainly use lots and lots of energy. We generate a lot of waste. We manage many, many people. So it's kind of like our citizens of O'Hare and Midway, the folks that work there and the passengers that we serve. So I've been able to bring a lot of the stuff that I learned in the sort of city planning, urban planning realm to the airport, and vice versa. I learned lots and lots about how we can manage our resources in the urban context simply by working at the airport.
Well, we're so thankful for your time today because this is our first deep dive into aviation and sustainability. And for our listeners out there, I'm on one of your wonderful websites. I'm on www.flychicago.com. I then went on the O'Hare section and I clicked sustainability. So for our listeners that want to follow along on their iPad or on their tablet or their whatever device that they've got in front of them, that's where I would go right now. But Amy, give us a little bit of macro overview of Chicago's airports in terms of passengers, flights, aviation, and sustainability, and how they all start to interact in terms of how many people are you serving and how many flights do you have to deal with on a regular basis?
Sure, yeah. So as you can imagine, O'Hare is one of the busiest airports in the world. We're the second busiest in the world, and we had about 67 million passengers in 2012. Wow. We provide service to 200 domestic and international destinations, and we also have a major center for air cargo shipments between FedEx and the USPS and other cargo handlers around the world, with more than 1.2 million tons of cargo handled in 2012. So it's certainly a huge hub in terms of aviation. And then on the southwest side of Chicago, we also have Midway International Airport, which some of your listeners may know if they've ever flown on Southwest, because the majority of flights coming in and out of Midway are Southwest Airlines flights. And that airport, while it's we consider it to be the busiest square mile in aviation, it's just a really dense little airport, but we served more than 19.5 million passengers last year. So it's growing very, very quickly. It's Southwest's number one market, and so we are experiencing lots of growth. And then on top of all that, we're also managing the $8 billion O'Hare modernization program, which is one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the country. And that program has presented a huge opportunity for us to establish ourselves as a leader in sustainability, because we are essentially, rebuilding the airport. We're expanding it. We are moving lots and lots of earthwork. We're building new facilities, and it's just a huge opportunity for us to approach, green construction in a totally new and innovative way that has never been done in aviation. And that's really where we established ourselves as a leader.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, but let's go back a couple steps. When was the epiphany of the leadership at Chicago Department of Aviation when folks started getting around a table and saying, let's focus more on sustainability? Was that of recent times?
So that was actually about 10 years ago when we announced the O'Hare modernization program that I just described. Yeah. And again, we would have, if we didn't incorporate sustainability from the very beginning in that, we would have really missed the boat. I mean, we knew that it was going to be, something that would establish, our legacy, and our leaders at the time, which, our former mayor and then our current Commissioner Rosemary Andolino really had gotten together and decided that this was a huge priority for the city. And so that was about 10 years ago. And actually prior to that, we have some other initiatives that were certainly green and sustainable in nature, but it was not until that time that we really hit it hard.
On a macro level, what can an airport do? Because we have listeners from city leaders from all around the country and actually around the world that listen to the show. What can an airport do to be more environmentally responsible?
Yeah, so I guess what I'd first say is that aviation in general probably doesn't have the reputation as being the greenest in the world, really. People are very concerned about emissions coming from aircraft and things along those lines. I will say that airport operators such as the Department of Aviation don't actually fly aircraft, so that is a little bit outside of our wheelhouse. But in any case, we do operate these massive facilities. So between the 7,200 acres at O'Hare and the square mile at Midway, that are 24/7 mission-critical facilities that are basically always going, always running.
Yeah.
We have lots of lights that are always on. We use lots and lots of water and generate tons of solid waste. And then with the O'Hare modernization program, we're generating lots and lots of construction and demolition waste, as well as all the resources that go into powering the construction equipment. So all those things, have an environmental impact, which we have control over. And so that's been our focus, is to reduce the impact of all of those different things that go into running an airport on a daily basis.
For our listeners out there who just joined us, we've got Amy Malick on. She's the Deputy Commissioner of Sustainability from Chicago's Department of Aviation. Amy, give our listeners a couple examples of what's unique in terms of your sustainability initiatives at your two great airports, Midway and O'Hare.
So I mentioned earlier our focus on green construction practices at O'Hare. And starting in 2003, as I mentioned, we developed guidelines which are now being used by airports all around the world, called the Sustainable Airport Manual. And your listeners are probably familiar with the LEED green building rating system that the U.S. Green Building Council developed for green building construction. And we decided to build our own sort of parallel rating system for airport construction because our context is quite different. We're building runways and, air traffic control towers and things like that are very aviation focused that LEED did not necessarily apply to. So we built our own green rating system very specific to airports, and now it essentially applies to everything that goes on a daily basis, whether it's designing runways to operating a restaurant inside of a terminal facility. So that's one unique thing that we are quite well known for. We've got, airports, as I mentioned, all over the world that are using that as a framework for their own sustainability practices. So that's one of the sort of starting points that we've used. And I mentioned air traffic control towers. We developed actually the very first LEED certified air traffic control tower at O'Hare, which was completed in 2008. And one thing that's very unique about that, which is also somewhat unique to Chicago, is that it has a green roof on it. And Chicago is, as some of your listeners may know, known as the capital of green roofs. So we just love them here. It's been something that we've focused on for many, many years. They've got all kinds of wonderful environmental benefits that we promote, and we have actually 14 of them at our airports between O'Hare and Midway, the largest square footage of green roofs at airports around the world. So we love those, and we love to tout their benefits, and we've been able to convince folks who may not have been very interested in that type of technology that it's actually a really, really good thing, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also from building operations standpoint as well.
Amy, you mentioned you're 10 years into it as an organization, and there's so many. Sustainability is a journey, and we all know that and understand that now. It's not an end-all, be-all, and it's never over, frankly. So,
that's right.
So you mentioned all these opportunities, really: lights, water, food waste, the green roofs you're doing. Are you touching all of them, or what gets you out of bed in the morning? What's now on the frontier? What's next to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the future is really in the long-term goals that we are trying to reach. And there's a lot of climate science, that's out there in terms of the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we need to reduce in order to maintain a sustainable planet. And so, that's the kind of thing that certainly motivates me. But also, there's a lot of very exciting and sort of smaller impact strategies that we're implementing at O'Hare and Midway that excite me very much, and that I know that our traveling public absolutely loves. And I'll just mention a couple of those right now, just to keep it innovative, because changing light bulbs is really not that exciting to a lot of people. So we try to do some innovative things that provide educational opportunities to our passengers. For instance, we have the first aeroponic garden in one of our terminals that supplies fresh, locally grown produce to our concessionaires. So that's a great kind of educational opportunity to help people understand the benefits of local food. We also operate the first airport apiary, which is basically a bee colony at O'Hare. And that apiary, which has 50 beehives, is tended by ex-offenders in Chicago that are part of an organization that are working to provide workforce development and job training opportunities for folks who, truly need them. And so they're able to harvest that honey and generate, a skincare line that they sell at Whole Foods. Excuse me.
What's it? And that also What's that skincare? I want to give it a little shout out here, because that's a very unique. So not only are you doing something sustainable, this is important, but you're doing something, recycling. You're recycling something, but you're also recycling lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we think about all this in terms of people, planet, and profit. That's the triple.
So what's the name? And what's the name of that product that you're selling at Whole Foods?
It's called Bee Love, and it's something that our airport concessionaires also sell, and it's a great gift that anyone who travels, through our airports can pick up, just as a reminder of the exciting sustainability opportunities that are out there.
Wonderful. Keep going.
And one last little fun tidbit is earlier this year, we actually hired a herd of goats and sheep and burros and llamas to help us with our landscaping around the edges of the airport. And so those grazing services really help us to reduce the use of gas-powered equipment while removing vegetation in areas that would otherwise attract birds and other wildlife, which are not compatible with airplanes, as you probably know. So that's, again, just a fun and very, very educational opportunity that, the traveling public has just enjoyed greatly. And we'd love to, while we do take sustainability incredibly seriously, and the very, very hard stuff that takes many years to implement is complemented, I think, nicely by some of these lighter and, media-friendly and really fun initiatives like our apiary and our grazing animals.
That is amazing. I never thought when we started discussing the great work you're doing over in Chicago in the aviation department that we'd be talking about beehives or goats. I mean,
right, exactly.
I mean, so that's just, what can, a couple things. What can other airports learn from what you've done in Chicago and where you're going with what you're doing in terms of sustainability?
Well, first I'll say that we have a wonderful network of airport sustainability leaders around the world that are part of what we call the Airports Going Green movement, and it's something that we actually sort of founded about 6 years ago. With a conference that we host in Chicago every year called Airports Going Green, and this really brings together my peers from all around the world to share their stories about what they're doing in their wonderful cities around airports and aviation. And so we learn from each other a lot, and we try not to ever reinvent the wheel, although all of us like to be the first at something, but we certainly can learn a lot from each other. So, I've got peers all around the world that are doing really exciting things that I learn from every day. So I think, again, if the focus really on daily operations, because, again, we do touch every single facet of the environment in our day-to-day operations at airports. So ensuring that, you're really understanding what all those opportunities look like. And every, airport is different, but at the same time, we do touch lots and lots of different stakeholders, whether it's our concessionaires, our airlines, our custodial staff, our rental car, partners, things like that. All of which, have these amazing opportunities to reduce their environmental impact. And I think, for me, if there's one lesson learned, it's really that engaging all those stakeholders in the dialogue is absolutely critical, because our purview is, limited in scope to some degree. But if you start looking at all of these stakeholders that operate at airports, again, from airlines to rental car agencies to, concessionaires. It's like peeling an onion. I mean, there's just endless opportunities. And then it also starts to get at the corporate culture, within these large corporations that we work with, airline companies and things along those lines, that are doing amazing things at the corporate level. So, we can start to have some really, really big impacts when we look at it that way.
When the leaders of aviation come to your conference, Airports Going Green, and for our listeners out there to learn more about that, it's airportsgoinggreen.org, airportsgoinggreen.org. Do you get competitive? Besides sharing best practices, do you say, wow, they're doing this over at this airport, we're going to do that next? Are you always not only sharing, but also a little bit all competitive together and trying to...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. A little friendly competition never hurt anyone. We love to one-up each other a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's been incredibly friendly. We love to tout each other's accomplishments, and in general, it's just a really, really friendly network of peers. But yes, we love to be the first at everything, as do I think a lot of our peers.
We talked about bees and goats and green roofs. Give our listeners, we're down to the last 2 minutes or so, give our listeners just a little visibility on what you're working towards in the next couple of years that are totally out of the box, that are going to continue to move the needle with regards to sustainability.
Well, for us, we're trying to establish a couple of major developments here that are very sustainability focused. That would be a first for Chicago and for our region, although other airports have done things like this, so I won't say that it's necessarily completely outside of the box. But one would, for instance, would be to develop a 50-acre solar development at O'Hare, which would supply a lot of green energy to the airports. So that's other airports have done this, so certainly, as I mentioned, we wouldn't be the first, but it would be a first for the Chicago area, and would be huge for us in terms of being able to generate renewable energy at the airport. So that's something I mentioned, sort of the hard stuff. This is definitely one of those hard projects that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And so it's something that we've been working on for a little while now, but we're really, really excited about. And similarly, I didn't mention earlier that for our O'Hare modernization program, which is a huge opportunity with regards to construction and demolition waste reduction. We've been able to recycle about 98% of our construction and demolition waste on the O'Hare modernization program, which is a great success for us. But we do have a long ways to go as it relates to our sort of daily operations and the waste that's generated at our terminal facilities. We're working on a strategy to become a zero-waste airport, and we have quite a ways to go to reach that goal, but we are working on a development that will allow us to recover a very, very high percentage of our waste. I'll say that about 40% of our waste is organic, so it's food or soiled paper, things like that could be composted. And so we recently established the nation's most aggressive green concessions policy that will require 100% compostable, disposable packaging, things like that, so that we can capture lots of that waste.
Perfect.
Those are the things we have going.
Amy, thank you so much. And for our listeners out there, again, it's www.flychicago.com. Amy Malick, you are a sustainability aviation superstar and truly living proof that green is good.